This is day 4 of the December 88 7-day retreat in Springwater. Many questions have come up about watching thoughts. One of them being, why do I do that? I've been doing it now for a day or two. But the question keeps presenting itself. What for? I don't feel much is happening while I'm doing it. And I also don't find it very interesting. I think it's a crucial question. What are we doing this for? Why be aware of one's not just processes of thought or process of thought, but the instantaneous connection that thought has with feeling, emotion, action, reaction. And its source, where does it come from? The observation and, shall I say, appreciation of its incredible power to direct and affect and move not just this human beings, but human beings. The incredible power of thought to motivate human beings to do violence, to go to war, to annihilate each other, is brought home every time one thinks or sees a documentary or movies, or reads about things like the Holocaust. Which was not, in its magnitude, it was a unique occurrence, but there are holocausts all over the world where, due to the power of indoctrination, thinking and thought arousing feelings and emotions, human beings annihilate each other, thinking that they're doing a good thing in doing it. Through manipulating and indoctrinating this process of thought from earliest days of children, these feats are accomplished. Two sort of poems that were either posted in schoolhouses in Germany, where I grew up, We had to recite them repeatedly, still stick in the mind. One of them said, I have been born to feel in the German way. I am totally tuned into German thinking. First comes my country, then the other many. First my home, then the world. And there was another one which moved me in its imagery or poeticness. And it said, I want to sink down into my knees before this holy German earth and thank God that I speak German. You may laugh. But as a little child, this was very moving. This was not saying what others are like. It was just imbuing one with one's own identity, the specialty of it, the sacredness of it. The holy German earth, and thanking God, bringing those thoughts in to elicit what one feels and thinks are connections with the supernatural, with God, with the holy. The fact that human beings have been for centuries and still are capable of killing other human beings in the name of their religion, their god or goddesses or gods, their beliefs, patriotic and religious, attests to the almost unlimited strength of thought to affect our feelings, emotions, actions, and reactions. And we don't see what we're doing. We're not aware of it. There's some reality that comes with this indoctrination and thought, and the emotions seem to be based on something real, the emotion of patrioticness or feeling attachment to one's religion, the holy books, the leaders, holy or political, and attachment to saving that for future generations and annihilating whatever may be in the way, or else converting or annihilating. And it is because we do not understand and watch as it happens the functioning of thought, its connections, its power, its source, its consequences. On the smallest level in ourselves and in our relationship with the people nearest to us and throughout the world, in our global, worldwide conflagrations. There are some of these last words of Christ on the cross when he was being humiliated and tortured, praying to God, saying, "My Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing." But it's not enough to ask for forgiveness for not knowing. We have to find out, don't we? Or else this perpetuates itself through us, through our ignorance of our thoughts and their power to initiate highly charged action, highly charged righteous action or whatever. And we can all think this through for ourselves. It is so, the evidence is everywhere. Look through a newsweek, turn on the news, listen to a presidential campaign. The use of emotionally charged words and concepts like patriotism to arouse a following or arouse rejection of someone. The other candidate. To watch, we talked about it before, our tremendous craving to conform, to obey, to follow. Because it's comfortable and makes one feel secure. People still ask me whether it was really necessary to leave a religious tradition. After all, you also have forms here, people will say. You're also sitting in front of the group, like the teachers, and somebody also brings you the water, somebody says, and prepares your seat. It's the same thing. Don't kid yourself. The person didn't say it. I'm adding that. And it's good to question these things. I could bring in my own water, prepare my seat. Maybe we'll discuss it in staff whether it's possible. So up to me, probably. Actually, frankly, talking quite informally, I appreciate some time not to have to think about anything. And it's nice somebody brings this water. I may still write out a question or be on the toilet someplace. But I could bring it here. Maybe it would help to dissipate this feeling that there's somebody here that gets special veneration or treatment, privileged treatment. The way I see it and the way we work on staff, well, I don't have the feeling I'm venerated at all. We're together in this whole thing. This kind of thing doesn't come up. At least I don't feel it. Maybe I'm inured to it. I don't know. But we have some division of function and labor here, which is efficient. Well, I may still get some rest, or write out some notes, or be on the toilet. Somebody brings the water and brings the cushion here. But since I invited suggestions for changing the form so it's less reminiscent of teacher worship, I'll give it more thought. But what is more crucial than the cup of water and the cushion brought and fluffed up is this person here indoctrinating, requesting obedience and conformity and belief, requiring it, as it is very often in spiritual centers, passing on something to be taken on blind faith. Because it's, as far as I can see, the most dangerous thing to do, to manipulate the human mind rather than to expose it, to show and point to the manipulability of the mind, so that each one of us is so aware of it that it will not continue to happen as it comes up from moment to moment, being influenced, wanting to follow, wanting to believe and taking belief for reality, not seeing the difference, being attached to image of oneself and what one is identified with. Be aware of the whole process of identification. My family, my clan, my centaur, my God, my country, my religion, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. To expose that so that we see what we're doing, we see what's happening. Not in order to feel blame and guilt over it, but to bring clarity and light to these processes, which are moving us so darkly and so dangerously and violently against each other and against ourselves. Because if we have a bad image of ourselves, an image of sinfulness and guilt and badness, then there are conscious and unconscious destructive processes set in motion against ourselves and others too. One person mentioned recently waking up in the morning and feeling being bad, having done something wrong. I know that feeling. Waking up and some thought going through the mind of, maybe I said something wrong. And immediately this feeling. But one can catch that thought and one doesn't have to believe it. One can test it out, did I? And what of it? One cannot change what was, but one can correct a mistake or start freshly. Either correct a mistake or it may be incorrectable. But learn and see and be open and not be stuck in the darkness of guilt and shame and blame, because then there's nothing seen. Nothing can be observed when one is in that kind of a cocoon. But to see how it comes about, one thought, which may or may not have relevance, it may be a habitual thought. One has always woken up thinking one has done something wrong, because one was educated very early in sinfulness, badness. One was told that one is bad and punished for it. And the punishment often is not just a physical punishment. It may be isolation in one's room, or the angry look of a parent whom one wants to look lovingly upon one, or benignly, non-threateningly. And here comes this stern eye, a little furrow between the eyebrows. And then when that furrow between the eyebrows and that stern look or angry look appears again, maybe due to something else, immediately one thinks, I must have done something wrong. I must be bad. And then it doesn't have to be the parent, it can be someone else looking that way. And I must have done something wrong. Which again is the power of remembrance and word and thought and its association with feelings and emotions and reactions. So this is, I think, the most basic thing why it behooves us to be aware of what happens in the mind and body and in our interaction, to spot it, and it can become a deeply interesting and energizing occupation. To discover for oneself what happens. And if there's really a direct and immediate, not a second hand, but a first-hand discovery of a thought arousing fear, and the fear arousing further thought or reaction, if that is seen directly, there's an enormous energy is released in this discovery. Maybe just a little energy. I don't want to have these big words, because then one expects enormous energy. Remembers it, compares the present little energy, and feels, I don't have enough. He or she has more. And then comes envy. One can observe all of that. It's all there for total discovery. Bearing the mind and body. And illumining it with insight, with understanding, with observing, without sitting in judgment. That's a crucial aspect of this observation. Because if there is a sitting in judgment over it, then there is no observation. It's thinking about oneself. We talked about that in one talk. The seeing has stopped and the thinking takes over again, how bad one is or how good one is. To notice that. And the more we talk about it and one thinks about it and questions it and we dialogue about it in meetings, the more facility for awareness to occur. It has something to do with this deep concern about the whole thing and an awakening of interest and the seriousness of it all. It's not a pastime. To fill one's time with something. After all, now I don't have a practice, shikantaza or counting breath or koan or whatever one's practice may have been. Now I've got this to fill my time, but what of it? It is something that goes on every instant. Memory, thinking, reacting, emoting. And out of that, wanting or fearing or hating, escaping or attacking. That and one doesn't have to be very much aware of it at all. One is more aware of moving the body than one is aware of the movement of thought. Not that one moves the body, of the body moving, than of thought moving, but there's something built in, a motion of the body, that there is awareness that this is happening here, and not somebody else moving their arm. It's moving here. I want to avoid saying my arm because there's no owner of this arm, but let's say it carefully. I know I'm moving my arm. But there is a strange and uncanny reality to thought, as though this was something that's actually happening. Not just a movement of memory and association and neurological linking with emotion and feeling is all taken for so real and so convincing. The most evident is the dream, where one is not at all aware that one is dreaming. There can be an awareness that one is dreaming, but most of the time we're not. And when one wakes up, one would like to know, well, what else would have happened? As though one was interrupted in something real. Or one may dialogue in fantasy with another person, and something comes up that distracts one, and one still wants to know, what did he say? And one has created it oneself. Another thing which is not self-evident, obvious, is that there is no thinker thinking these thoughts. There's only a stream of thoughts and feelings and emotions. I always mean all of that together. You can't separate it. And also, as somebody pointed out to me, there is pre-verbal memory. Before we verbalized and thought verbally, that memories are laid down in the little baby from the very beginning, maybe even from times in uterus. And these memories act like verbal memories. So we're talking about all memories and all the interaction of memory, thought, feeling, emotion. It is all one process, one inseparable process. So where was I? Does anybody remember?
No thinker of thoughts.
All right, thanks. Yeah. There's a deep-seated conviction that there is a thinker in one who thinks these thoughts, isn't there? The way we talk about it establishes the thinker right away, because we say, I am thinking. I'm thinking strange thoughts. I'm thinking delicious thoughts. And is one interested to find out whether there is a thinker? Please not to accept because one person sitting behind a microphone says there's no thinker. But can one take this as an interesting challenge to trace that thinker? Find out what that thinker is, if there is a deep feeling of, yes, there is one. Right now, we're all thinking of this problem of thinker and thought. And in saying there is or isn't a thinker, we are positing the possibility of one in thought. We can think of a thinker. We can think that I am thinking. And by putting it that way and thinking that way, we've already established it. By thinking, I shouldn't think these thoughts. They're evil, they're sinful, or they're dangerous. There is posited a thinker who can also control his or her thoughts. Can one probe into this, what this thinker is? Whether it is anything but thought? Find out. When there is a moment of, or moments, if time doesn't matter, of no thought, the mind is open and listening. There's no thinker then. And then there may be the thought, I'm listening. So one thinks that there is a listener. Because one thinks that way, one thinks that there is one. But it's thought. I can't prove it. One has to find this, come upon this oneself, that it's one unitary flow of thoughts, at times establishing a thinker, at times a controller, a listener, a meditator, a believer. It's infinite. Infinite possibilities of thinking about oneself as being something and taking that thought for real. Many people who have trained in spiritual centers find in observing thought and emotion that one has developed over the years of practicing, of focusing the mind on a practice like breathing, counting, or a mantra or koan or whatever, or labeling whatever is going on from moment to moment, that there has developed a reflex of a sort that as emotions or thoughts one doesn't want to look at them, one is afraid of them or afraid of the pain or whatever of looking them, the practice suppresses the thought and emotion that was coming up. And one may not have been to a spiritual center and have developed the same mechanism in one form or another of repressing what is about to come up so that it does not come into full consciousness. And in spiritual practice, the purpose of this cutting off of thought, as it is often called, is to clear the mind of thought, so that once cleared of thought, it can be open to perceive or receive a different state, a state of freedom or enlightenment or whatever. But this is a controlled state of mind, using a practice to cut off thought, and it happens under the auspices, the sponsorship of thought, thinking I must cut off thought in order to attain enlightenment. So it's the very activity of thought that may bring about this state of controlling thought. And what actually happens in the mind, the thoughts that come up, are not understood, are not looked at, and their linkage with emotion, their power, their source, all of that is not looked at. It's suppressed before it's in the light of day. And one notices that. People notice it. One notices it. That one has been doing that. If one begins to let go of the focusing or concentrating practice, then these things come into light. So then the question comes up, and we have gotten into it in every talk, I think, how am I to look at this fear or the anger? There's no how, it's just not repressing it. And not accepting it. Not manipulating it or trying to control it. It's none of that. And when none of that takes place, then what's left is no separation. Just what's there. And when no habitual action is seen, discovered, and dissipates, so there's just what's there, that too doesn't remain the same. It also dissipates. So in looking at whatever comes up, thought, the repressive urge, but that is discovered and the thought is allowed to show itself. It's actually at the moment of attention, the thought is already a memory. It was. It's not now, because now is attention. But as the whole thing unfolds of how thought produced this emotion and so forth, the mind has a way of clearing itself, quieting down. It just happens that way as one observes thought and emotion. Those quiet down. They don't do things underground. They're observed and come up and finished, ended in the observation. An observation, as we said before, which is without the judge, without the acceptor or the controller. Just a free, non-dualistic, just there being whatever is there. Please, if this isn't clear or muddy or needs to be talked and looked at again and again and again, it doesn't matter how often, it's always a fresh beginning as far as I'm concerned. Do bring it to meetings and we'll go right into it again. Not as we did it now, because that's gone, but freshly. Because it's so important. That we understand what we're doing, what is happening. We want to solve world problems and don't understand what happens in our own mind, which is the root of the world problems. The power of thought that goes that moves ignorantly or unseen. the divisive power of it, fragmenting power of it, destructive power of it. And I need to say here that this is not a condemnation of thought. We're thinking right now. We're using thought to talk and understand each other. But it's quite a difference whether talk takes place in daylight of awareness or whether it takes place in the darkness of ignorance, belief, superstition. We went through all that in the beginning. Sometimes people are apologetic when they come to a meeting and have the same question again. They tell me they have the same question. To me, it's a new question. If it wasn't a new question every time, there couldn't be these talks. It has to be, and it is a new challenge every time something is brought up. And in this looking together and questioning together, there's immense energy and love. Why? I don't know, but it is so. So don't ever feel that you're wasting my time, or that's also an old habit. When in school one is supposed to have learned it at least after the I don't know how manyth time, and then one gets scolded. But this is something different because the mind is new this moment. Only thought is old. But looking is always new. It's not yesterday's looking. And these patterns that we're observing and tracking and discovering are so ingrained over not just the time of our own personal life, but over centuries and millennia. They have operated in human beings and are laid down in memory. The brain is full of laid down memory chips of habits and ways of thinking and ways of reacting and ways of prejudicing, prejudging, and ways of identifying and ways of worshipping, ways of finding security and avoiding fear, and ways of fearing. The whole thing has all been laid down and gone on for thousands and thousands, maybe 100,000 of years. So no wonder it keeps happening all the time. It comes up. What is there to be distraught about? There's the possibility of seeing it now. That's all that matters. And yet, let me also say, this invitation to look at something together does not mean that one has to come to a meeting in order to do this. Then comes the apprehension if one doesn't have a question or is maybe timid. There are all kinds of things happening when one goes to see somebody who is behind two doors. And sitting in a line, there are all kinds of memories sitting in a line waiting to see somebody. School principal or a doctor. And of course,
since everything is interconnected, the feelings that were there when one sat in line to see somebody one was afraid of or could expect some scolding from, then these feelings are there. Fears or apprehensions. They don't apply to this situation, and yet this situation, through its association, neurologically, chemically, electrically, evokes these responses, which are also laid down in memory. So that's why it is so. It's not incapacitating to feel fear and yet come into that room. And one may not want to talk about anything. Then we'll just sit quietly. People have been asking, is it all right to cry? Why do so few people in this room cry? Or nobody? I'm not in here most of the time, but it's not an infrequent occurrence that people cry. Some more audibly than others. I remember the first session I ever went through, the eyes didn't remain dry almost all the time. So there's nothing wrong with tears flowing or sobbing. But I didn't know that during that first session, one can also look at that. Not divisively or judgmentally, but with interest, with awareness. So one neither mustn't cry nor does one have to cry to be in touch with feelings one doesn't know. Can one find out at this moment and not go by ideas of what should or shouldn't be in a discovery or healing process? We will end here for today.